Welcome to part 3 of my rigging tutorial. The next thing you want to do after you've created biped is to fit the biped to your mesh. Now you might wonder why most meshes are in this pose. It's called the Da Vinci pose. And that's actually to help with making sure that your animation moves correctly. When I hit F4 and look at the mesh, I can see you want to have a lot of definition around the shoulders and around anywhere where there's a lot of motion. So elbows, shoulders, neck, waist, knees, ankles. Those are the critical points. And that's why it's important to model it in this Da Vinci pose. So let's go ahead and start to fit the skeleton to the mesh. Now the first thing I'm going to do actually is select the mesh, go to the display panel, and freeze it. You have options to make it see-through or to show frozen in gray. I'm going to make it see-through just for the sake of making it easy. Freeze selected. What this does is now I can't select the mesh. I can only select the skeleton. So going into the motion panel, I'm going to press H, select the root, which is gob. The root is the center of your biped, and it's generally what you want to select whenever you're moving the biped or doing something that affects the entire biped. It actually is useful in animation as well. You want to select that root and then go ahead into figure mode. Now I don't really understand why 3D Max has this figure mode that you have to go into, but you do. So if you start rigging outside of figure mode when this button is not on, you're going to get some weirdnesses later on. And it'll start snapping back into weird positions. Basically, keep it on figure mode. So now let's go ahead and start. The first thing I'm going to do, of course, is move that root into the center of the goblin's body. So right there. I'm going to zero it out. Now I've already zeroed out the mesh. I've made it into the center of the world. So the coordinates are going to be 0, 0, 0. I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is 0. I'm not going to worry about the Y and Z axis because, well, if you want to see, 0, 0, 0 is the origin of the world. So I'm moving it back here, but this x-axis is on 0. And you can see that in the front view. It should be exactly in the center of the body. So now that I've gotten that pelvis where I want it, I'm going to start rotating and scaling things. One of the first things I'll do is go ahead and select this pelvis and scale it. Widen that out, make sure that the thighs are going to be where I want them to be. It's also a good idea. Sometimes you can hit Control and select multiple items and widen them out, make them taller. Another useful thing is mirroring. So if I select this arm, I can do that and do that, but I don't necessarily want to have to do everything twice. So I'm going to go into this track selection thing. And if I hit symmetrical, it now selects both. You'll notice that I have this on local rotation. That means that it's rotating where the joint is instead of the world. And it's important to keep it on local. That's generally what you're going to use when you're animating. If you put it on world rotation, it's going to do something like that, and it won't move the way it should for the skeleton. So with local rotation, it's moving as it should. Now I'm just going to do a lot of this really quickly, and in reality you would spend a little more time and make this more finessed. But it's possible to do a lot of this very quickly. I'm working in the front view only right now, but I'm going to switch to the side view and make sure it looks just as good there, and then into the perspective view. Right here, I might say, oh, this spine joint is too tall. This one might be about right. This one should be a lot wider. This one could also be wider. And you generally want to fit the skeleton as close as possible to the mesh. An important thing I found is to keep these clavicle, like the clavicle and the upper arm joint, right where the shoulder is. If you hit F4 and look at the mesh, you want to see where this is going to be moving. If I was to put this over here and I started to move that upper arm, it could move a lot of this mesh in ways that I don't necessarily want whenever I move the arm. So it's important to fit the joints of the biped to the areas where you think the motion will be the most obvious. Now I'm going to go into the left view, select the root, move it back. It looks like I moved it out of whack. And then start rotating and basically scaling everything to make it the size and shape that it should be. You'll notice this ponytail here can be moved. So I want it to fit that jaw a little bit better. In fact, I want this entire portion of the goblin to fit better. So I might go ahead and make it so that that neck is lining up. And now I'm going to go ahead and rotate that, scale it, and I can actually move it as well. It's also important to make sure that the bottoms of the feet or the bottoms of your biped are lining up as close as possible to the world plane, so that when your character is walking, and again you'll notice I'm hitting symmetrical so that both feet are selected. And the reason I'm doing this, even when I zoom in here, it's because in general you're animating the biped, you're not animating the mesh. We're going to attach the mesh to the biped, but it's the biped that you're animating. And you can also use top view here, and of course I would go ahead and make sure that those arms are fitting inside the body. You can move things back. I might do something like that, and I'd continue from there. So anyway, a lot of this is just foresight in anticipation of animation. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and finish the skeleton, and that's your skeleton.